nobody will listen. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Prince Broad Technical Coordinating Committee for March 13th. I'm William High, your chair. Hooray, hooray. Let's do, first of all, is there any public comment at this time? Hearing none, let's go around and do welcome and housekeeping. Let's start in this room, if that's all right. Down there.
Brett Baldwin, Division 14, Assistant DDC Engineer.
Jay Hollingsworth, Division 14, DDC Engineer.
Steve Williams, NCDOT Division 14. Stephen Sparks, NCDOT Division 13.
Donahoe, Buncombe County Transportation.
William High, Buncombe County.
Tristan Winkler, FBRMPO.
Steve Eastman, Land and Sky RPO.
Asha Rado, Land and Sky Regional Council.
Hannah Bagley, French Broad River MPO. Katie Broadwell, Land and Sky Transportation.
P.T. O'Connor, French Broad River MPO.
Terrific. And either Hannah or Asha, whoever, if you would help the folks on the line.
I'm not prepared. Sorry, I've never done this particular part. Well, sure, give me correctly. Ada McGovern.
Ada McGovern, Safe Routes to School.
Autumn Radcliffe.
Autumn Radcliffe, Henderson County.
Eric Rufa.
Yeah, Eric Rufo, Town of Fletcher.
Brian Mayhew.
Good morning, Brian Mayhew, NCDOT.
Connor Clappin.
Good morning, Connor Klassen, VHB.
Sorry, it just keeps moving, and now Hannah Smith.
Hello, Anna Smith, NCDOT Division 13.
Harry Buckner.
Hi, this is Harry Buckner. I'm with the town of Biltmore Forest.
Jessica Morris.
Jessica Morris, City of Asheville.
Lauren Blackburn.
Lauren Blackburn, VHB.
Jody Ferguson.
Jody Ferguson, Haywood County.
Lucy Crown.
Good morning, Lucy Crown, City of Asheville.
Michael Malachek.
Good morning, Michael Malachek, Town of Mills River.
Pat Christie.
Good morning, Pat Christie, Village of Flat Rock.
Savannah Parrish.
Savannah Parrish, Town of Montreat.
Sam Cullen.
Sam Cullen, Town of Maggie Valley.
Is there anybody that I forgot?
Matt Manley.
Nathan Bennett, Town of Mars Hill.
This is Daniel Sellers, NCDOT, Transportation Planning.
Brendan Merrithew, NCDOT Division 13.
Matthew Manley, City of Hendersonville.
All right, great. Thank you all. If you come in person, it goes a lot faster. Throwing that out there, folks. You're online. Okay, with that in mind, let's get on to the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda. If there is any discussion, please bring it up. Otherwise, we will entertain a motion and hopefully a second.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else?
I'll second that, Sam Cullen.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, Lucy Crown, City of Asheville. Jessica Morris, Art.
Aye.
Harry Buckner, Biltmore Forest.
Aye.
William High, Buncombe County.
Approved.
Chloe Donahoe, Buncombe Transit. Approved. Daniel Sellers, TPD.
Approved.
Pat Christie, Flat Rock.
Approve.
Eric Rufa, Fletcher.
Aye.
Jody Ferguson, Haywood County.
Aye.
Autumn Ratcliffe, Henderson County.
Aye.
Matt Manley, Hendersonville.
Approve.
Sam Cullen, Maggie Valley.
Aye.
Nathan Bennett, Morris Hills.
Aye.
Mike Malachek, Mills River.
Approve.
Savannah Parish, Montreat.
Approve.
Katie Eastland, LFRPO.
Aye.
James Eller, Weaverville. Ricky Hurley, Woodson.
Aye.
Hannah Smith, NCDOT Division 13.
Aye.
And Stephen Williams, NCDOT 14.
Aye.
Thank you all. Don't worry, we only get to do that 5 more times. So, everybody get excited. All right, with that, let's kick it off to business, and I will let Tristan introduce Lauren and safety targets and move on from there.
Great. So your eyes are not deceiving you. We are talking about safety targets for the 3rd month. After last month's discussion, the TCC recommended moderate, or they recommended the safe targets for the required safety targets. During the MPO board, they voted to not adopt any targets with concerns about the applications of safety targets to projects and processes, noting that there's not a lot that the targets are currently doing to influence those processes. And so with that, the MPO missed its deadline for adopting safety targets. That does put us out of compliance with the federal requirements involving safety targets. After some discussions with Federal Highways, we are bringing this back for consideration again. And this time we are bringing in the big guns. So Lauren Blackburn, who is managing our Safe Streets for All study, has put together some slides on safety targets and potential scenarios that we can look at to move this forward. So Lauren, please take it away.
Let me try sharing. I think I need permission to share. Or, okay, let me try again. All right, can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Thank you for the big guns accolade, Tristan. I appreciate that. Hopefully we'll be able to help similarly. So as Tristan just mentioned, we were asked to help bring some additional insights and perspective on some various scenarios that the MPO could consider for setting safety targets. So I'm going to talk about it in 2 ways. I'm going to describe that both in terms of a long-term visionary goal and then how we could back into some interim annual safety targets for your annual safety target setting purposes. So just as a reminder, the reason that this matters to the safety plan is because we do need to describe a overarching goal for the plan. And I'll talk through some options about that in just a moment. The goal is separate from your safety targets, but they are connected because if you're setting a goal of arriving at a certain number of fatal and serious injury crashes or a certain reduction, that helps us to be able to describe also the amount of effort and resources and energy that the region wants to put towards improving safety over the long term. And then with those goals, we'll develop strategies and more specific types of countermeasures that address those types of problems. So again, some differences between targets and goals. Those targets are annual or interim objectives. the MPO updates this every year for federal highway requirements. And absolutely, it's helpful if they can align with a long-term goal. Goals are much higher level, ambitious. You could describe them as visionary, oftentimes long-term, and otherwise extend across a long time period. So some options for how we set goals for the safety plan could be one of many different ways. One way is to describe what we call a zero-based goal. Oftentimes those are referred to as Vision Zero type goals, where you would say, for an example, that you want to reach zero fatal and serious injury crashes by a certain date. This is very similar to how NCDOT has set a goal for them, for the state as part of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan of moving towards zero fatalities and serious injuries by 2050. Another type of goal is to have a reduction goal. That's more of a percent reduction, oftentimes by a certain date. And so another example of that is also found in the state's Strategic Highway Safety Plan of a 50% reduction by 2035 of those fatal and serious injury crashes. Other types of goals could include an average reduction, maybe over a 5-year period, a 5% reduction, something along those lines. Or even more, a slightly more complicated way of doing it, but also something that could be a little bit more measurable with transportation, is to think about it in terms of rate. You could do that by population rate or traffic volume rate. So all these are really good, equally good ways of describing a goal, which again is really just the end vision or end goal of the plan. And ultimately, we do need to have some kind of specified horizon or end date for whichever approach we want to take. So one thing that we've done is we've taken some of your historic fatal and serious injury crash data and fit it to a model based on vehicle miles traveled, population and employment projections over the next 10 years. That's about as far out as we feel is somewhat reliable to be able to effectively calculate a future or forecasted number of fatal and serious injury crashes. So the red line is essentially the sort of center point of a range of what those totals may look like. So if you look historically, your totals of fatal and serious injury crashes were in the 250s, and then they dipped down to around 221. In 2021, during COVID, they dipped down, and then they started escalating quite rapidly over the last several years. One possible explanation for why there's a reduction in 2024 to 2025 could be a number of different things. It could have something to do with Helene. Absolutely. Other factors to consider there is we may still be collecting the data, the crash reports themselves reporting serious injury, and especially those fatal crash outcomes. But otherwise, you see a pretty steady trend line moving forward. And so this just gives us a basis of comparison. How quickly otherwise would we, based on some of these historic trends, be able to expect your fatal and serious injury crashes to change over time if there's not anything substantial that otherwise happens in the region? So some of the questions for you to think about when I present some of these scenarios is, which of these scenarios best fit your vision for the whole region for safety? Another question is, which one tells a story that is acceptable for this region, both in the near and the long term? Thinking about the message of which one that you think fits the overall ambition and mindset. And then we could also look at some blend or variation. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail. One thing just to present as a caveat, none of these future trend lines are based on actual crash projections, except for that dark or that bold red line that I showed you earlier. So that's showing up in the first 10 years. Otherwise, this is based on purely scenarios, based on overarching vision and goals. There's really only so far we can take data moving forward, but ultimately what we're trying to show here is how different interventions like the safety programs and projects that have already been in place or are about to be constructed and implemented today or have just recently been installed, those have the greatest amount of impact over the next 5 to 10 years. So if there's been a lot of that work happening, we hope to see a reduction in the near term. Another point of inflection is our larger projects in the midterm, such as your STIP projects over the next 5 to 10 years. The sooner those are constructed with appropriate safety improvements, the sooner we hope to see a change for the better. And then, of course, we want to also think about the long term. This could be an entirely new set of project types, more investment through the state safety program. It could be a different set of projects that you submit through the spot process. So each of these things can influence the near and the mid and the long term. And again, these dashed lines are merely just scenarios telling a different story about how we hope that the region would be able to shift towards safety over the next 30 years or so. So I'll talk about them in 4 different stages, and just think about this in terms of the long term for now, but then we'll talk a little bit more about what this means in the very, very near term for your targets. So the first one is a goal that we could describe as a 50% reduction by 2035, 0 by 2050. This is very similar to the state's goals. The only difference is the way that we would describe the trajectory. So one way you could describe it is that there would be a hopefully increasing or a decreasing change in those fatal and serious injury crashes, a little bit slower pace in the beginning, but after a while, after more safety projects are implemented in the very near term, we hope to see a slowing event, a dramatic reduction, and then ultimately it may kind of taper off a little bit. So this is one example. This is the most aggressive of the different scenarios, especially in the long term. Another example could be about a significant reduction by a certain date, but not necessarily arriving at 0 within the time frame of your MTP, which should be 2050. Sorry for the 2055 reference, but what we're talking about here is really focusing on when would we hope to see a significant reduction in those fatal and serious injury crashes. So this one looks like it would make a significant improvement by around 2040. So we'll call this the 40% reduction by 2040. Another scenario could look more like this, where it's a fairly steady, moderate tapering, or maybe even call it a flattening of the trend initially, and then it's moderate improvements are made over the long term, hopefully arriving at a vision 0 or a towards 0 by around 2055. That's after your MTP year, but not too long after. And then another scenario which you could consider is something similar to what I just showed you, except we're looking at a more moderate, longer term reduction, and it may take longer to ultimately arrive at a 0, if ever. So these are all, of course, things that are really very difficult to predict, but different scenarios or stories depending on how realistic or aggressive you want the vision for this region to look. So how that translates into safety targets. So as you all know, there are 5 safety performance measure targets that each MPO is required to adopt to and for Federal Highway Administration. NCDOT provides a version of that proposed safety targets each year for you all to consider, or you can create your own safety targets. So in addition to adopting those state-derived targets, other options could be something more realistic, more goal-driven, or a blend. So similarly, as I mentioned earlier, some of these goals are ultimately kind of striving towards the same thing, moving towards 0 by a certain date, or a reduction. And then again, just bringing up these questions that are, thinking about which ones of these scenarios make the most sense for your region, which ones describe for your region a goal that you want to put on paper and think about moving forward, and which ones align with your overall philosophy. So I've zoomed in on those, and again, your safety performance measures and targets are set on an annual basis, so we're really zooming in on the very kind of small incremental part right here. And I think one thing that probably shows up very easily is in the next year, it's not likely that there's going to be a dramatic difference in any one of these scenarios. It takes some time for any of these safety improvements to take hold. So the differences in terms of an actual target that you would set may not be that different from one another. But again, we want it to align to a long-term goal. So an example of like this option A could look like something along the lines of a 1% reduction from your current year or last year. The option B could look like something a little more or actually a little less. It probably would be a good idea if at least one of these scenarios you considered was lower than your expected fatal and serious injury crashes for this coming year. So you could consider something more of an immediate dip and then a leveling off. Option C could look more like an increase compared to last year. So that doesn't sound like a very ambitious goal in the near term, but it still may be pointing towards a long-term goal. And then similarly, this option D may be an immediate increase in your fatal and serious injury crashes, but ultimately we want to see that as a decrease in the long term. So the big picture here is all of these things are really just based on an ultimate vision and goal, but at the near term, on a year over year, you could translate that into a reduction by either a modest or aggressive amount. And I think that's it for me. Happy to revisit any of those options. I've just drawn in one other kind of option describing what I mentioned a moment ago. If you wanted to entertain a target that is lower than what you would expect the crashes totals to look like for this year, that's a sort of a variation on the theme.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Does anyone have any questions for Lauren? Okay. I have a question for Tristan. Can you share with the TCC the concerns of the MPO board?
Sure. I think it was kind of twofold. One, again, one part is, as I stated earlier, was that there was concern about what the targets are really connected to and the ability to influence safety trends. And kind of an extension of that was concerns about adopting anything aiming for Vision Zero. So, I mean, just to know if those were comments made during the discussion, you know, not necessarily what people voted on, but, you know, one thing that I think at least one member, maybe two, at the board mentioned, is that the idea of trying to get to zero fatalities seems unrealistic, and they felt that the targets being set should be more realistic and more attainable.
Well, as has been previously noted at our last meeting, anything other than these targets are going to incur no small amount of effort by MPO staff to maintain this data. With that, I am inclined personally to move towards to reissuing this committee's recommendation to keep the state targets. But of course, this is a committee, so who else has any thoughts?
Just to note on that, NCDOT's safety unit has said that they would provide assistance, technical assistance to lower the staff burden if we set our own targets. So previously, I would have pleaded to just adopt the state targets for selfish reasons, but NCDOT has noted they would take on a lot of that burden.
I mean, to be clear, though, we don't have a specific target. Thank you, Lauren, for your examples. But for, you know, unless someone wants to propose, you know, half by 2075 or something, we're either saying state targets or requesting the board adopt, determine their own, effectively what we do. Which thus ambiguity.
Lauren, I think you have some data you've developed on what depending on the trend line that people think is most suitable for our region, what those targets would actually look like.
Yeah, so this option A for the 2025 year would probably be very, very similar to this bright red line, somewhere maybe even a 1% reduction from the last year totals. So again, that would be not too far off of where you calculations might have put you otherwise, but setting it just a little below that total. The number B, if you wanted to set that down a little further lower, like this highlighted version I've got shown, that would create about a 20% reduction from your total last year. Ultimately it may be towards more of a taper. One thing I don't have the NCDOT version of those safety targets on this graph, but I think those would show up somewhere down here in the 140, 150 range, so quite a bit further south of all these other numbered points. And then the options C and D are both an increase in terms of the fatal and serious injury targets, or across the board, they would all represent some type of increase. C would be maybe a 1% increase on top of last year, and then option D could even be even more, upwards of 15 to even 20% increase from your last year targets. So it sort of depends on which direction you want to communicate. Like I said, the DOT version of those targets would be somewhere closer to the 150 on this graph.
William, I agree with you that maybe the TAC should just decide this on their own, since they have not agreed with TCC recommendations. As far as I know, from my recollection, there was no discussion about which way they wanted to go with the targets. So we really don't know what they would, what their desires are.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know that the state targets are not desired. There was a vote at the board on adopting the state targets that was not successful. And I mean, to note, there was a motion for the to adopt the moderate targets that we presented that were kind of halfway between the state targets and kind of maintaining our 5-year trend line. But that was amended to just not adopt targets.
All right, so we have 3 options here. We can either reissue our recommendation for the state targets. We can recommend the board come up with their own, or 3, we can punt and tell them we offer no recommendation.
I make a motion for option 3 that we punt.
Does anyone want to second Steve?
This is Daniel. I'll second.
All right, NCDOT recommends we punt.
Oh, come on now, that's not.
Well, I mean, no, you're right. This is not NCDOT. 2 representatives. All right. Well, with that, Asha or Hannah, would y'all take us around?
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Hart, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Harry Buckner. Buncombe County, William Hyde.
No. I don't know what word I would use for that.
Buncombe Transit, Chloe Donahoe. PPD, Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson.
Aye.
Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Matt Manley.
Approved.
Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen.
Aye.
Forest Hill, Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Mills River, Mike Malachek.
Approve.
Montreat, Savannah Parrish.
Approve.
FBRMPO, Vicki Eastland.
Aye.
Weaverville, James Eller.
Approved.
Woodson, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 13, Hannah Smith.
Aye.
And NCDOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye. Thank you all. Just to clarify, I have no objection with that motion. I would say I do, but I'm mostly just frustrated with the board's failure to act on it. That's all. Okay, with that in mind, let's move on to resolution. Support the new Clyde Highway Reduced Conflict intersection. Yeah, please.
Okay, so I'll introduce this. I thought it was a great segue. And thank you, Lauren, for the information you provided. We'll be carrying that on to the board. But NCDOT reached out to MPO staff last month about a proposed safety project on Carolina Boulevard in Haywood County in between Clyde and Cancel on Waitsel. Waitsel Way? Am I pronouncing that right? Yeah. I butchered our road names sometimes. And so they've asked us to bring forward a potential resolution of support from the board. And just to note, that's not something that we've really done much in the past. I think maybe one other time have we done that. But just to note, with the safety intervention that they're proposing, sometimes there can be some community concern and potential confusion about the intervention. And we see this with a lot of safety interventions, that sometimes you are restricting turning movements that can cause people frustration.
Discomfort, yeah.
But a link that we put in your agenda packet is to FHWA's proven safety countermeasures, which in general show that the treatment that NCDOT is proposing is associated with a 63% reduction in fatal and injury crashes. And so, to know, with safety countermeasures, that's a really high number. I know a lot of times, people are concerned that, well, you aren't solving all the problems. It's very, very hard to solve.
Very hard.
But a 63% reduction in fatal and injury crashes is certainly significant. So to give us some more detail, we've got Jay Hollingsworth from NCDOT. So Jay, please walk us through if you don't mind.
Thanks, Tristan. I was hoping for the big guns introduction, but I'll live. I know you can see this screen. Okay, so like Tristan was saying, it's a US 1923 between Canton and Clyde, and it's at this Waitsel Way. It's a medical center there, so it's a pretty heavily traveled road between the two towns, and obviously a medical center is going to have quite a bit of vehicles coming in and out of it, so we're going to go over the project location, which we already have twice, safety information, design concept, and I'll open it up for some questions. So just another map, similar to what Tristan was showing you, and red arrow points to the exact location. This is a satellite image. Everybody can see that okay? So the project length, this is Waitsel Way and the medical center. And this is a 1,000-foot project length. And the idea is that we reduce or stop the left-hand movements coming out of Waitsel Way, crossing 3 lanes of traffic.
going east on 1923. And the idea is they would have to take a right-hand turn at a Waits Away and then come down 1,000 feet. There's your inconvenience, by the way. And then turn around in a bulb out here to go back east. So like Tristan was saying, you know, the least little inconvenience to people would just, it's all kinds of cries. But anyway, this location has had multiple accidents. And recently, several years ago, had 2 fatalities. And that brought our benefit to cost ratio up to a 45-24, which put it as a priority. So anything we can do to reduce fatalities, we're going to try to, and as Tristan noted, we expect a 63% reduction in crashes and hopefully no fatalities. And all of those fatalities were from left-hand movements. So if we can stop that, if we can reduce that and save lives, we're going to try to do it. So with that, questions?
So there'd be no impact to eastbound traffic moving into the medical facility, is that right?
Correct. They would take the same left-hand turn into the medical center. You just couldn't cross the lanes of traffic to go east out of it, right?
I think I will share, I live in that area, and there are other intersections along that corridor who already have situation.
Mm-hmm.
There are already these conflict intersections back towards Canton where you cannot make a left or out of the facility. You have to go down and use the U-turn bulb. So it's basically just an extension of the existing cross section to some extent where you lose the physical barrier. And given that it's at a medical center, there's a significant number of folks in the aging population that are coming out. And sometimes they suffer depth perception or hesitate and different things. So I think it's just a recipe for disaster to keep that left-hand turn movement. Personally, I just want to share that it is a continuation of an existing cross-section.
I lived in Clyde myself, so I see it all the time through there. So.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Well, I think, go ahead.
Jody Ferguson. I don't have necessarily a question that may be able to be answered immediately, but I'm curious if this is one of the intersections that was identified in our Safe Streets for All study as one of the 25 in Haywood County that, you know, has safety issues. I'm just curious if this is one of those.
Great question.
I'm curious as well. I'm looking at that right now. I'll let y'all know in the chat.
Thanks, Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I believe it does show up as I believe moderate to higher risk on our severity scale from the Safe Streets study. I'll wait on Lauren about the top intersection, but to note it did show up in our severity risk analysis.
If it is receiving a limited amount of state safety funds to be improved, then it obviously is a pretty high priority for the state in putting that out there. Those are very limited funding, and if it has bubbled up to the top, there's a reason.
All right.
Anyone else?
Would anyone like to make a motion? I know we're waiting on Lauren, but while we wait.
We are looking for a recommendation to support a resolution of support from the board for this proposed project.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Steve. Does anyone want to make a second?
Sam Cullen, I'll second.
I heard Sam's name, and I'm not sure who the second person was, so.
It was Lucy, but Sam got it.
Thank you, Sam. I'll let Asha decide who put in the notes. Y'all can approve or not next month. With that said, would you take us around, please?
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art Samora.
Aye.
Or Forest, Harry Buckner.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William High.
Approved.
Buncombe Transit, Chloe Donahoe. Approved. PPD, Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Russo.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson.
Aye.
Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Matthew Manuel.
Approved.
Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen.
Aye.
Mars Hill, Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Mills River, Mike Malachek.
Approve.
Montreat, Savannah Parrish.
Approve.
RPO, Vicky Eastland.
Aye.
Weaverville, James Eller.
Approved.
Woodston, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 13, Hannah Smith.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, guys. Right. All right. With that, let's move on to item 4C, the 2050 preferred growth scenario.
Yeah, and with that, we have Colby Brown from Manhan Group here to walk us through some of the work that's been done on our 2050 socioeconomic projections. So just to note, the socioeconomic projections play a key role in the MPO's 25-year plan, or Elevate 2050. They help determine where we anticipate or how much growth and where that growth is likely to happen. That also plays a key role in updating our region's travel demand model. That is one of the key tools to help identify future congestion issues, and is used by NCDOT as a starting point for their traffic forecast to determine the number of lanes needed as part of projects. With this study, we scoped for 4 different growth scenarios for the TCC and board to consider. We do have to adopt one, which is known legally as the region's preferred growth scenario. And so we are looking for a recommendation today to bring a preferred growth scenario to the board this month. So with that, Colby, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Tristan. And can you all hear me all right and see my slides okay?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. And thank you so much for your time and attention this morning. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to present to you our work. I'll dive right into it and try to leave some time for questions. So as Tristan mentioned, we have been tasked with developing 4 future land use scenarios for the FBRMPO study area, which includes Buncombe, Henderson, Haywood, Madison, and Transylvania counties. And the first stage of that was to develop projections of households and employment in the future for that study area. So the first thing we did is look at historic and future trends projected by others and tabulated by others. In the past 25 years, the region, your region, grew by about 125,000 people, or 31%. And for the next 25 years, the NC State demographer predicts about the same increment of population growth. So obviously this creates or sets up the challenge for both the region and for us to figure out where that growth is going to go and what it's going to look like. From that population growth projection, which we basically stuck with the state demographer's projection for 3 out of 4 of these scenarios, our household and employment forecasts are based on that, but we combine that with some private projections, some private forecast sources to come up with translations of that population growth into households and employment forecasted for the region by type, categorized in a way that allows us to kind of draw inferences about where they might go. These totals then get put into a land use forecasting system that we've built. I should mention this isn't our first rodeo doing this for the greater Asheville region. We had a similar study about 5 years ago. for the 2045 projections. And we really felt it was important to build upon the system that we developed then, but enhance it to add some additional detail. I won't go into all of the details on this slide, but just want to point out that this system is sensitive to things like current zoning, generalized land use classification, and how that's going to change in the future in sort of realistic terms. Availability of transit service, sewer and wastewater service. A really key thing for this region is steep slopes and elevation. That's also taken into account, as well as protected areas, national forests, places where development shouldn't be happening. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the influence of real estate market forces and highway access and congestion is taken into account here in this forecasting process. And so we're kind of bringing all of those different elements together in a multi-stage process that draws from a bunch of different data sources and is calibrated to existing data and recent trends so as to make sure it's realistic and data-driven. The forecasting process then kind of steps forward into this 2050 horizon year with 5-year increments with checkpoints where our land use forecasting system interacts with the NCDOT maintained travel model every 10 years. And that ensures that we have some feedback. The land use forecasting system and the travel or traffic forecasting system are kind of doing this dance for each of the different scenarios where they exchange and take turns providing data to one another. And that ensures that we have a forecast that's not only useful to the travel modeling, but also consistent with it in the future for all your future travel model runs. I won't go into too much detail on this, but this just shows that we also, for each time step, there's kind of a movement of information from the previous 5-year step to the current one, but there's also movement of information from lower geographic resolutions, such as like the really detailed parcel level, to a census block level, and up to a TAZ level. So it's a multi-resolution model as well as a dynamic one. And I didn't really dwell on it, but we have taken into account the impact of Helene to some extent, to the best extent possible, given the available information, as well as our sort of known pipeline of recent and likely future near-term real estate development projects. And we received some input from some folks on things that they know about that are coming up in the near future. So our future land use scenarios, we started with a broader set and sort of moved towards these 4 with input from the prioritization subcommittee. And I have listed sort of what the key assumptions are here, but the broad takeaway is that the baseline is really a market-driven or data-driven scenario. It's sometimes termed your business as usual, but that's kind of sort of projecting forward what we think is likely to happen based upon observed behavior and recent trends, essentially. It's very difficult to do that, challenging to do that when there are major disruptors in the recent history, but we've made our best attempt based upon the available information from the past decade or more. And then our dispersed scenario is what it sounds like. It's basically lowering density and sort of looking at what that means. If you lower the acceptable build-out density across the region, it tends to spread out the growth and kind of scatter it a little bit more across the region relative to the baseline. Whereas the consolidated scenario kind of moves things in the opposite direction. And again, this is a data-driven effort and it's market-based. So we know that there are, there is some preference for walkable areas for certain development types, and there is some preference for transit for certain employment types, especially service employment, the fastest growing component. So what we did is just kind of emphasize that and exaggerate that in this consolidated scenario. And that tends to drive growth towards lower VMT per capita parts of the region, basically, where people are driving less. And the accelerated scenario is really kind of a hypothetical what if, because growth has outpaced expectations in the past. This kind of is what if that happens again, and we have a doubled household growth rate. That was chosen to be consistent with an EPA resiliency study that had been done in between our last round of forecasts and this one. So there's no other differences from the baseline. So everything's sort of just, normal business as usual behavior, but the household growth rate is doubled. Here's what the travel behavior implications of that look like. So again, we grouped the sort of TAZs in the region based upon their VMT per capita according to the travel model, based upon the calibrated travel model runs for 2020. So we have high, medium, low, and low VMT per capita areas. And VMT, again, stands for vehicle miles traveled. It correlates broadly with emissions, traffic, and safety problems. So it's kind of like the biggest core metric of transportation impact that most agencies use. And as you can see, the consolidated tends to reduce growth allocated to high and medium high VMT per capita areas, put it in the low and medium low per capita VMT areas. And the dispersed scenario, it's really kind of scattered, but generally tends to have a little bit more of the growth allocated to these medium high kind of areas. Whereas the accelerated growth is just higher VMT across the board because it is higher population and household growth, obviously. So those are the travel behavior implications. I think we have just a minute left, so I should caveat that all of these projections are still somewhat draft. We're still studying these scenarios using the region's travel model in partnership with NCDOT. So they could shift a little bit, but this is the broad brush picture of what happens under the business as usual scenario in terms of some more geographic detail about where growth is likely to go. And these maps show differences from the 2020 base year. So where there's more purple, a little bit more growth is allocated there versus the yellow areas may even show some losses relative to the base year. And here, this map is actually differences from that business as usual or base case. The gray areas are showing more growth than under the base case. The red areas show less growth than under the base case allocated to those TAZs. And so this kind of hammers home the sort of consolidated, more dense nature of that scenario, which is a little more scattered on the employment side of things, but still you can see a consistent pattern with a bit more sort of employment density around these more sort of dense, currently dense areas. And obviously there may need to be some changes to the sort of build out assumptions in order to put all that growth where it wants to go under this scenario. And as I said, we're still studying this, but based upon our preliminary results, I believe, Tristan, can we say there's been a recommendation? Do you want to summarize that?
Yeah, so at the prioritization subcommittee, we requested a recommendation of one of the 4 scenarios. The prioritization subcommittee recommended the consolidated growth scenario that Colby just went through. To know, the consolidated growth scenario is a little more aspirational. So, I put some very cursory pros and cons in your agenda packet. So, as Colby stated, to achieve something like the consolidated growth scenario is going to require changes in our housing and land use patterns from what they are today. I think one of the things I stated in that meeting is that housing, especially, and land use, is being discussed a lot. I think from my point of view, it would be quite an assumption to make that our region won't see any policy changes in that realm. And the consolidated growth scenario, it helps overall with the vehicle miles traveled and the burden that our transportation network would be under in the future. Overall, just to point out, there are spots where there would be more traffic, even even if they are with shorter trips. But overall, the consolidated growth scenario, I think it better suits a lot of, I think, where the housing discussion is starting to go. I would note the Asheville City Council 2 nights ago adopted 5 amendments to their UDO that would reduce parking minimums, enable more multifamily housing. And to me, that kind of policy changes like that go hand in hand with a consolidated growth scenario.
First of all, Colby, thank you for considering your time. However, this meeting is nominally scheduled for another hour, so we're fine on that. Not to say we have to take it up, people, but with that in mind and ignoring the fact that I don't know if Costco is included in these scenarios, does anyone have a recommendation or, excuse me, a motion they'd like to make to recommend this to the board one way or another?
I just want to quickly echo Tristan's comments about changes in Asheville and also say that, you know, there's a lot of discussion happening in Hendersonville as well. We have text amendments that are teed up and will be going to council soon that are definitely going to open opportunities within the city limits to consolidate additional growth. So I will make a motion to support that recommendation for the consolidated growth.
Thank you, Matthew. Do we have a second?
This is Vicki, I'll second.
Thank you, Vicki. Asha, if you would do the honors.
Sure. City of Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Yes.
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Harry Buckner.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William High.
Approved.
Buncombe Transit, Chloe Donahoe. Approved. PPD, Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson.
Aye.
Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Matthew Manley.
Approve.
Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen.
Aye.
Mars Hill, Nathan Bennett. Mills River, Mike Malachek.
Approve.
Montreat, Savannah Parish. RPO, Vicki Eastland.
Aye.
Weaverville, James Eller.
Approved.
Woodfin, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 13, Hannah Smith.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye. Thank you all, and thank you, Colby. All right, moving ahead to 5310. Stacy, please take it away.
What's up now? Thanks to William for informing me that I have plenty of time to get through this.
So much
time.
We took up, I think, the full 2 hours last month, so.
We'll try to get you out of here early.
No reason for federal updates, no reason, we can't do this again.
So just some historical context about where we're at in the 5310/JARC project process. We opened up the call for projects in mid-January. The application process was open until February 20th. On March 5th, the prioritization committee met to review the scores that were put on each of those applications and to recommend selection of certain applications. Today, you'll be recommending project selection to the MPO board. And then next week, the MPO board will vote on that project selection. And then in May, we'll come back and have the requisite TIP amendments for the 5310 and JARC projects. Just an overview of 5310 funding. Simply, 5310 exists to operate, to allow transit operators to operate public transportation services that improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. This year's 5310 allocation came to just over $477,000. 10% of that was set aside for administrative fees for the city of Asheville, leaving us with about $430,000 for this year's call for projects after that administrative fee. Bringing that down a little bit further into how much can be used for traditional funds, 55% of the 5310 funds are designated toward traditional projects and have to be used toward traditional projects, so that came to about $263,000. And the remaining 35% of funds can go to other projects, and that number came to just over $157,000 for this call for projects. We received 6 applications for 5310 funding, 4 of which were for other funding and 2 of which were for traditional funding. And so we've broken those down and scored them based on the application type. So we had 2 applications for traditional funding. One was from Better Together Transportation, and the other was from Buncombe County CEDTAP. Those applications scored 63.5 out of 100 points for Better Together Transportation, and Buncombe County CEDTAP scored 100 points out of 100. We have 3 scenarios to present you with in terms of possibilities for selection of those projects, and I'll go through those briefly. Scenario 1 would just take a ratio of the amount of funding requested to the amount of funding available, and so we found that we could fund up to 94.32% of each project's request if we were to fund them both out of their original ask. And so that would put Better Together Transportation receiving just under $15,000 and Buncombe County receiving just under $248,000. Scenario 2 awarded the projects based on points, and so given that there was such a large scoring difference between Better Together Transportation and Buncombe County, Scenario 2 would not fund Better Together Transportation, and it would award all of the traditional 5310 funds to Buncombe County. The rationale for this scenario was just based in the rather extreme scoring difference, most of which Better Together Transportation's application did not perform as well because they are a new application. They don't have much experience in utilizing federal funding, and this was their first application cycle. As of the weekend prior to the prioritization subcommittee's meeting, Better Together Transportation had only given out 10 rides to date. Scenario 3 would be prorated by points, so a combination of that original ratio by the amount of points each application received. That would put Better Together Transportation receiving just over $10,000 and Buncombe County receiving almost $263,000. After meeting with the prioritization subcommittee recommended scenario 2, which would not fund Better Together Transportation and award Buncombe County CEDTAP the full traditional funding. So with that, I'll pause for a second and see if we have any questions. Hearing none, what I would request at this time is we pause to go ahead and take a vote for the recommended scenario for the traditional funds. We can do each of those separate.
Wow. Okay, sure.
Would anyone like to do it all together?
Would anyone, well, no. There's only so many votes no one do.
I have a question. Does the traditional funding amount dictate what we're going to vote on for the non-traditional?
We have to award the full amount for traditional in order to award any of the other
I'm
funding.
just making sure we're not leaving any on the table there so that we can do that.
Well, we can technically increase the traditional amount, but this is the floor.
Yeah, Buncombe County's application was for the full amount of the 53.
Understood. I just wanted to make sure we weren't impacted in non-traditional.
Correct.
With this scenario.
We are in a positive. They're non-traditional.
Okay.
I really, There's only so many votes on this deal, we still have two, okay, sure. All right, yes, does anyone want to make a motion on the traditional funding?
I'll make a motion to approve.
This is odd. I got a question. Do we need to do these in two motions or can we do them as one?
We can do them as one.
My,
I mean,
that,
that's how-
I'm sorry.
We can do them as one. Okay,
Okay.
let's just, sorry.
Well, I would make a motion that we approve the traditional funding and then we approve scenario 2.
All right, I think that's technically a second because Vicki said it, but yeah, thank you all.
Oh, I'm sorry. That works.
You're fine. Quite all right.
Sorry. All right. Asheville, Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Terry Buckner.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William Hyde.
Approved.
Buncombe Transit, Chloe Donahoe. Approved. TPD, Daniel Sellers.
Approved.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Gaylord County, Jody Ferguson.
Aye.
Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Matthew Manley. Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen.
Aye.
Mars Hill, Nathan Bennett. Mills River, Mike Malachek.
Approve.
Montreat, Savannah Parrish.
Approve.
RPO, Vicki Eastland.
Aye.
Weaverville, James Eller.
Approved.
Woodston, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 13, Hannah Smith.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thank you. And before we move on to the second part of this, I just want to mention that the prioritization committee also recommended that we have outreach to Better Together for future application cycles. Not that they were unworthy, just slightly lacking.
Yeah, and just to note, Daisy's done a great job of starting to gather together materials that might be helpful for the Better Together nonprofit.
Okay, part 2.
And so what I can do for part 2, since they're not interdependent, is I'll go through both 5310 non-traditional and JARC funding, and we can try to do this in one motion if that works for you.
That sounds great.
All right, let's do it. All right, so for 5310 non-traditional, we had 4 total applications, 1 from Buncombe County RIDE, 1 from the Senior Companion Program, 1 from the Senior Companion Program Caregiver Project, and Buncombe County Council on Aging. Underneath scenario 1, we looked at a ratio of what we would be able to fund if we funded each application evenly across the board with the amount of available funds divided by the request, sorry. And so that put us at 68.42% is what we could fund of each application and fund everything evenly. Scenario 2, awarded projects based on points, and so the way that this worked is it awarded projects based on the highest points and then moved through each application until there was no more money to give out. And so under that scenario, the Senior Companion Program Caregiver Project would only be partially funded. Buncombe County RIDE and the Senior Companion Program would be fully funded, and Buncombe County Council on Aging would not receive any funds. There was very minor differences in the scores. There was a lot of discussion about the scores at prioritization, and mainly the differences in those scores were due to the administrative capabilities of each of the applicants and their familiarity with dealing with federal funds, but there wasn't a substantial difference in their ability to, or in their perceived ability to handle those funds. Scenario 3, which was the scenario recommended by the prioritization subcommittee, combines scenarios 1 and 2 and prorates the applications both by points and available funding. And that would fund each, that would give a slight bump to the applications that scored better based on their points on the application. And again, scenario 3 was recommended by prioritization. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions. All right, and then we're moving on into JARC, or Job Access Reverse Commute. The JARC program is intended to fund the development and maintenance of transportation services designed to transport welfare recipients and eligible low-income individuals to and from jobs and related activities, and activities related to their employment. So this year's JARC application, which is a 10%, or JARC allocation, which is a 10% set aside of our 5307 funding, comes to just under $413,000. We received one application from the city of Asheville for JARC funding, and that was to maintain ART routes 170 and S3. And their application came to the full amount of JARC funding that we have available. They'll be paying a 50% local match for that application. And we recommended, or the prioritization subcommittee recommended funding this application in full. Any questions there?
All right, I don't expect any questions on the JARC part. Does anyone want to talk about the non-traditional 5310? And if not, would someone like to make a recommendation?
I'll make a that we recommend scenario 2 of the non-traditional. Is that right? Yeah. And the JARC funding, fully funding the.
I believe it's actually
Scenario 3. Yes, it is. Sorry about that. Misread it.
Thank you.
Yes, scenario 3.
Do we have a second?
This is Jessica. I'll second.
Thank you, Jessica. And Vicky. We'll find out next month. All right.
All right, Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art, Jessica Mora.
Aye.
Butler Forrest, Harry Buckner. Buncombe County, William High.
Approved.
Buncombe Transit, Chloe Donahoe. Approved. CPD, Daniel Sellers.
Approved.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Approve.
Fletcher, Eric Rupa.
Aye.
Gaylord County, Jody Ferguson.
Aye.
Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Matthew Manley. Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen. Mars Hill, Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Hills River, Mike Malachek.
Approve.
Don Treat, Savannah Parrish.
Approve.
RPO, Vicki Eastland.
Aye.
Weaverville, James Eller. Woodfin, Ricky Hurley. In CDOT Division 13, Hannah Smith.
Aye.
In CDOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye. Thank you all. We are done with voting. All right. No informational items this month, so we'll take it into regular updates with Division 13.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I presume Tristan's pulling up your item, or whoever.
Yeah, I may need someone else to do it. My computer's not happy about something.
Tristan's having trust issues. I got it. You got it. We have plenty of time.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. So construction updates, I'm gonna keep it brief. New stuff. The contractor has mobilized on I-2513 AA and AB. That's the I-40 piece of the connector project. They mobilized, they added the concrete barrier wall out there, and they're starting tree clearing and grubbing operations, and that's probably gonna last a couple of months. We're not doing any lane closures or reduced speed through that area, so just kind of be aware as you traverse through there that there's reduced shoulder area because of that barrier that's been installed, and all the clearing and grubbing operations will obviously occur behind that barrier. So I wanted to mention that. We are still anticipating opening I-26 to 4 lanes in both directions south of Long Shoals, but we're still coordinating that with I-4400 as well as our work zone traffic control folks. I don't really have a tentative date on that yet. I don't really think there's anything else construction to draw your attention to that's new from last month. As far as project development, this is just a comparison of the current STIP with the draft STIP and some notes. Our public comment period is still open for the draft STIP. It's running through April 4th. So if anybody wants to share that with folks or take the survey yourself, there's still time to do that. I wanted to touch on Swannanoa River Road repairs. We're in the home stretch. Crews have still been working to reopen the road from South Tunnel to Biltmore Ave. I believe that should be open by the end of the week, but there will definitely be a separate press release that goes out for that and goes to the MPO. And I know Tristan typically distributes those to the TCC and TAC. So look for that. Should be really soon in the short rows on Swannanoa River Road repairs. I don't really have anything else. I'm happy to take any questions though.
Thank you, Hannah. Briefly, how many lanes is it south of Long Shoals now?
It's just 4, 2 in each direction through the construction. We've got a lot of the pavement built, but we've got the lanes closed with barrels during construction. So what the project will be though is 8 lanes all the way from Brevard to Henderson County, like just south of whatever that overpass is that's south of the rest areas. I'm not really familiar with that road, but it transitions from 4 to 6 in Henderson County. So it's been constructed, but it's remained in the 4-lane pattern for traffic control reasons.
I beg your pardon, I thought something else. And then secondly, do you have an update on the Wood Avenue Bridge?
I don't. I think that it's going to be open at the same time as Biltmore Ave from Swannanoa River Road from Biltmore Ave to Tunnel. A few weeks ago, all that was lacking was the 3-bar railing being repaired on the bridge. And they should have replaced that a couple weeks ago. But I think the holdup is some concrete crew, like sidewalk, curb and gutter repairs at the South Tunnel intersection and opening up that whole area. The repairs to the bridge itself are complete, is my understanding, as of maybe a couple weeks ago.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions for Hannah? All right, Steve.
Hey, I have a question. This is Lucy. Hannah, tell me again when the deadline for the draft STIP public comment is.
April 4th.
Thank you.
All right. Barring any other questions, I will kick it off to Steve.
All right, I forgot to say this in the Land to Sky RPO meeting. Wanda Payne has retired, and we have a new division engineer in Division 14, Wesley Grondstaff. I think the MPO sent a notice out. Wesley was a district engineer, and then division maintenance engineer, and then most recently the deputy division engineer, and he has moved into the division engineer slot. So congratulations to Wesley on that. We on construction? Yes. Name of the game in Haywood County are bridges. If you've driven I-40, you see that pretty much every bridge in Haywood County is being replaced. The I-40 and the Pigeon River Gorge is open, 1 lane in each direction. It is functioning, but I would caution everyone to not travel there unless it's absolutely necessary. And Russ Avenue's just kind of going on as it should in construction. I-26 in Henderson County, I think y'all you kind of covered this. It is complete in Henderson County, but it's still only open 2 lanes in each direction until the Buncombe County section is completed. I think Hannah said it's for traffic control reasons, safety reasons, that we don't want to go 2 lanes to 3 lanes and then neck it back down. Henderson County, the same projects you've been seeing for a while, just everything's progressing more or less as it should, with a few, like Highland Lake Road. I know that there were some issues due to Hurricane Helene that have delayed that some. That's it on the construction side. Project development, obviously we haven't added any projects. Last month we added that extra column there, the draft STIP column, so that you can compare the fiscal year draft STIP dates to the old dates. So we won't get into that in the detail unless anybody has questions about any of those.
All right, any questions for Steve? All right, thank you very much, Steve. Okay, Daniel, you're up. Are you still here? All right, well, Daniel didn't have anything for the RPO, so presumably he doesn't do RPO either, so.
Oh, no, I have comments. I just didn't hear my name get called.
Oh, sorry.
I think.
Daniel.
Yes. I did not get to speak at the RPO, but I have just a few quick updates. First off, for those of you who are familiar with our statewide planning initiatives group, they have finished their move out of TPD. They are now part of a different division of DOT. But these were great people to work with. They developed a lot of the interesting statewide plans I reported on, like statewide freight planning or the EV plan, or they helped develop the governor's plan every couple years. So hopefully they'll continue to have good communications, pipelines to get information out. But speaking of bad pipelining for information, there was a multimodal update from IMD this morning, but it was scheduled at the same time as the RPO meeting. So don't know exactly what was said, but based on the agenda, I do want to give just a couple updates. They have a note about a multimodal planning grant. The call for applications is going to open soon. I assume this is our normal multimodal planning grant that happens every year for small communities who want to develop bike ped plans. There is also a transportation demand management grant program that is currently open, and the deadline is March 21st. There is, and then just some updates, some of which I'm curious about, but I don't have any details. There is apparently an expansion of the intercity bus program in Western North Carolina. If anybody has some information on that, I think it would be useful for the group. And then there were just some other general updates about transit facility upgrades, complete streets, and safe routes to school. And then my final little fun update this week is their applications are currently open for a new PAGE program at the state legislators, specifically for high school students who are interested in state government and the transportation industry. It will be running later this month, and applications are online. It is called the Garrett Morgan PAGE program, Garrett, Garrett Morgan. And, if you know any good high school students interested in the field, I encourage them to apply and see what it's like from the inside. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Barring a mystery federal worker in our midst, I guess, Tristan, do you have updates for us?
Yes, a number of updates. Just so folks are aware, our normal FHWA liaison, Suzette, is out on maternity leave through June. Her replacement, George Hoops, wishes that he could be here, but they have limited limited travel ability right now. With that, again, a number of updates. First of all, we have a number of public meetings coming up. I'll send out an email later today. Those public meetings are for the MTP or Elevate 2050, as well as the Safe Streets for All plan. So that'll be April 7th in Henderson County, April 9th in Canton and Haywood County, and April 10th in Asheville at the East Asheville Public Library. We are going to be hitting up public libraries all over the region. And just to note, we have scheduled meetings for April, but we generally don't have April meetings. So in all likelihood, we will be canceling unless something urgent pops up. I think we learned a few years ago that it's easier to cancel meetings than it is to set up meetings that are urgently needed. But anyway, again, unless something pops up, we'll plan on canceling our April meetings. So I am going to say TCC, and I'll say this to the board, in lieu of our meetings, please attend the public meetings on these studies. They are very, very important studies for what we do at the MPO and for transportation in our region. Some federal updates. Something I emailed about last month was changes to the STIP amendment process. There was a memo that went out that all STIP amendments had to be approved in DC headquarters, in addition to the normal STIP amendment process. That has been reversed. And now STIP amendments are going back through their normal process for approvals. I'm not sure how many people are delighted by this news, but I'm delighted. I'm not sure who wanted STIP amendments to take longer. A Supreme Court case to highlight a vaccine coalition versus the U.S. Department of State. Why are we highlighting that? Because part of the decision made by the Supreme Court against the Department of State, essentially overall it limits the administration's ability to withhold and or rescind funds that Congress previously put towards projects and were obligated. Another thing to note, we just got this yesterday, there's a discretionary funding awards review. US DOT is reviewing discretionary grants that were awarded after January 20th, 2021, to flag activities not in line with the administration's priorities, including equity analyses, green infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure, and EV infrastructure. And to note, that review is for projects that do not have, or their funding has not been fully obligated as of yet. Also, there were two previous US DOT orders rescinded. Oddly, both of the orders had the same name. US DOT needs to work on names of their orders. But both orders essentially encourage states to use the bipartisan infrastructure law funds and consider social equity and sustainability when programming federal transportation funds. So the encouragement from those two orders, that has been rescinded. Some state updates, some bills that are out there. House Bill 201 looks to restrict truck traffic on US 2570 in Madison County. House Bill 363 allows regional transit authorities to operate a bus pool more than 10 miles beyond its jurisdiction. House Bill 364 allows local governments to borrow money for the purpose of accelerating local transportation projects identified in the STIP. House Bill 282 allows state funds to be used for standalone bicycle and pedestrian projects. Not to dim that one, but I think we've seen various versions come out just about every year for a while. And State Bill 145 authorizes supplemental sources of revenue for Mecklenburg County transportation. So all of those are kind of in various levels of progression, but things that we are keeping an eye on. Some other updates. The North Carolina Office of Budget Management, they plan to provide $400,000 for the Asheville-Salisbury Passenger Rail project to cover the non-federal match for the next phase in corridor ID. Also, we heard at the WNC Rail Committee that Norfolk Southern plans to restore the rail between Marion and Asheville. I think there was some uncertainty about that for some time. As noted before, NCDOT is currently taking public input on the draft 2026 through 2035 STIP. And that is due April 4th. So if you have any comments to provide on the draft STIP, please send it to NCDOT. Jessica, you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Tristan. Can you provide an update on the TIP amendments and UPWP amendments that are, I guess, maybe were part of this sort of limbo, January, February, and I guess this month, and where they're at now? Because there's a couple of them for, well, several for us that I think are concerning because they would fall in this equity, climate change, etc.
Just to point out that for the most part, if we're thinking of the same thing, though most of the TIP and STIP amendments that we've requested and discussed use formula funds, not discretionary funds. So just to note, I do believe that the Art Place project was a discretionary award, but I'm not aware of where that would stand in terms of the funding award. But overall, the STIP amendment process went back to the way it was, which my understanding is US DOT division offices can approve those TIP and STIP amendments to have the federal funds move forward, rather than it going through additional reviews at US DOT headquarters in DC. So those TIP and STIP amendments should be moving forward.
Okay, we also had a rather large low-no grant, discretionary. So I'm pretty concerned about that and would love to just know as soon as possible if that actually gets approved in the state TIP, and so we can move forward with trying to get the grant actually executed with FTA.
Yeah, we can check in on that.
Thank you.
Okay, some other updates, just to note, P 8.0 is expected to begin this summer. Don't laugh, Vicki, we're on that work group. We will be getting ready to talk about projects to be submitted for funding consideration. Just to note, at the prioritization work group, there has been a lot of discussion about the number of submittals, as well as the need to have revolutionary, having better cost estimates for projects being submitted and considered. But just to note, there's a lot of give and take there. The more better estimates you do, the more estimates that you're doing for projects, that's going to be a much bigger workload and a lot more work for consultants. To note, there were 1,440 highway projects considered in the last round of prioritization. If that number stays the same, I'm getting my PE, and I am making millions off those express designs.
How many ferry projects?
Yeah.
Thank you, Vic.
So, there's a lot of discussion about the number of submittals. I'll just say my opinion on it is that, the main thing is, if there isn't funding or there isn't much funding, I can't say I'm too excited about evaluating. I think in our region, it was, around 120 projects across most. So reducing the number of submittals, I think would be a positive thing. Not all of our peers agree, but one idea that is being discussed is rather than reducing MPO and RPO submittals, there would be more of a streamlined process for division MPO and RPO submittals. So that's being discussed, essentially having MPOs and RPOs submitting and approving all the projects being submitted. But I will note we are considering shifting coordination strategies due to the expected limited funding available. So I know that we had a lot of meetings as part of P 7.0, ultimately to not fund anything. I do think the coordination is really, really important, but we'll look at streamlining that to be less of a staff burden on you all. Some other MPO updates. Microsoft thought these were great icons, but new member orientation that's coming up on March 18th. So if you're interested in joining, please let us know. We do have a smaller room booked, so it'll be a bit more cozy than it is in this room. Also, we sent out a poll on TCC meeting times and dates. Please take the poll. As of right now, it's looking like there might be some change coming. But I think we only had 12 responses, 14 responses? 14 as of this week. So please take the poll, let us know what works for you and what doesn't. Your attendance is really important, and me taking up your lunchtime is not. Also, the FBRMPO conference that is coming in April 14th through the 17th in Wilmington. And just again to note, we host FBRMPO in 2026. So I will likely start to hit up, I already have started talking to people about mobile tours, but more to come. Also, this is something that will be an informational item for the board, something that Land of Sky is working on, is the comprehensive economic development strategy for the region. That's something required by EDA. And so they're at the point of doing a SWOT analysis. I'm on a call with a bunch of planners, so hopefully you all are aware of that, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And so we'll be sending out the materials from the SEDS team at Land of Sky, and your input is requested. It is an important document that helps to pull down economic development grants, and generally has a lot of great information to help make recommendations. So again, we'll be sending that out, and I will copy the project manager, Jessica Bond, at Land of Sky Regional Council. Besides that, Ada with Safe Routes to School. I was going to put her on the agenda, but our agenda keeps getting long. My apologies, but I really want Ada to highlight some of the upcoming Safe Routes to Schools events that are coming up. And Ada, I promise I will get you on an agenda in May.
No worries. I have the presentation ready whenever the time comes. So just an update for the next month for folks to know. Brevard Elementary is going to have a pop-up bike park in conjunction with their Title I night programming. That's next Wednesday. The park will be 2 hours long. It'll start at 3:30 and go until 5:30. Then we are working on a school zone infrastructure reporting tool right now. So that'll be up on the website hopefully in the next month or so. And that is for folks who want to report infrastructure needs or worries around their schools. And then Bike to School Day is May 7th. So if you know of any schools or organizations that want to do Bike to School Day, feel free to connect them with me. And then the new newsletter format went out this past month. So if you didn't get it, let me know. And if you hate it, let me know. And if you love it, let me know. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Ada. And Sandy, do you want to talk briefly about what's being planned for Strive this year?
Yeah, sure. Strive Not to Drive Week is coming up May 16th through 24th this year. So it's a kind of a wonky 9-day week based on some of our event planners' availability. But we have people, organizations, advocates from Haywood, Henderson, and Buncombe County participating this year. We're working on the full event schedule, which should be up on the website next week. And we've got lots of different events going on. We're going to have a commuter challenge. We've got lots of awards to give away. I just picked up 20 tickets to the Asheville Tourists that we're going to be giving away to participants this year. And yeah, we've got free transit day in Asheville. We've got free transit weeks in the other counties, and lots of good stuff going on. So I'll have more information to share by next week so that we can send out to the whole TCC.
Terrific. Anything else? Any comments, any requests, topics for next meeting? Great.
This is Daniel. I actually just want to provide 2 more updates that I semi-forgot about, but at least it's only 2 and not the 4 other things I remembered and then forgot about. Just 2 very quickly. One, my group has been reaching out to mayors in the mountains. In case you hear about it, we've been arranging interviews, and my boss is touring around talking to people. We're just trying to get testimony and a few questions asked about Helene and about the recovery process, and we'll be using it as part of our presentation at the MPO conference to talk about, what has happened. And then just so in case you hear about it. And then 2, I think last month I gave an update that we had commissioned a resiliency study just on recovery and implementation. I got the final draft, my favorite phrase in the world, final draft, last Friday. I'm going to do line edits on it later today or tomorrow. And so they'll probably come out in the next week or 2. But since Tristan kind of mentioned that we don't have an April meeting, I'll try to get the researcher lined up for a presentation later. But hopefully you'll have the study in hand soon. All right, sorry.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Any public comments at this time? All right, with that in mind, we will adjourn. Thank you all.
Thanks, folks.
See you in May.